I'm really happy with the turnout. I apologize for not having enough seats. I don't think we've ever had this many people come to this type of meeting in this room, and I apologize for that. We've got someone trying to get you some seats. The purpose of the meeting here is to have a review of the waterfront plan that's going to be provided by Jim Caldwell over here, and some of us have seen this, but we have some new counselors here and some businesses that may not be familiar with the waterfront site plan, and we're going to go over it. It's been a while. What I'm hoping is that we will leave here with a better understanding of what the impact may be to the businesses that are presently there, and maybe a better understanding also of possible opportunities for the future. After Jim's done, Mike is going to talk about the zoning, and at the end of this, hopefully we'll have some time, we'll have some questions from the councilors and some of the businesses. I want to thank everybody for coming, and from time to time this year, maybe we'll do some meetings like this, keep everybody on the same page and working together. So, Jim, if you'd like to start.
First and foremost, thank you very much for coming out on a Tuesday night. I'm sure there's 100 different things that you could be doing, but we really enjoy meeting with the citizens. I want to thank Council Capano and this committee. If this meeting took place 5 years ago, we really wouldn't be talking about the waterfront, right? We wouldn't be talking, because the power lines that existed in this area, and pardon my back for the folks behind me, it precluded any development from occurring. And I put this aerial up first. This is, just for reference, this is the bridge coming into our city from Revere, Route 1A. And you can see how much green space is in this area and then in this area here. And that's exactly where the power lines were located. So 5 years ago, if we held this meeting, we wouldn't be talking about development along this area because the power lines were there. We wouldn't be talking about a commuter ferry down this end because it really wasn't an idea that had come to fruition yet. And today we stand here, we have a master waterfront plan that is a document, and it's not a plan that, it's certainly not my plan, and it's not Council Capano's plan, it's the city's plan. And this plan was developed, we had 18 public meetings, and many of the people, I see familiar faces, showed up for those meetings. We hired Sasaki, who is world-renowned. They were our consultant, and they the city council voted on it. This is an official document, okay? So this plan actually started before the power lines were even moved. So we were hoping that the stars aligned and the power lines moved, and that did happen. So as I said, it was, I think, 17 or 18 public meetings we had, and then it was adopted before the city council September of 2007. When you come into our city from Revere and you look over to the right, and I'm born and raised here, there really isn't a lot, right? We can do better, and we will do better. The power lines hug this area here. That area that I'm pointing to on the map is somewhere in the vicinity of about 120 acres. Nowhere in the Commonwealth, nowhere in Massachusetts is there 120 acres of oceanfront land. This area is owned by a fellow named Joe O'Donnell, very wealthy, influential person. He owns that area, the first lot. That's what we consider the most valuable lot. Next to him is a person named Pat McGrath, local contractor. He owns that area, which is the mass merchandise area. Folks know where that is? But as you come into our city and you look over to the right, the master waterfront plan, and I'll get rid of this area. I'll just show you one more thing. Down here, the LNG tank, everybody knows what that is. Right next to it, that's where the commuter ferry will go. And I can talk about that project as long as you want. This here is an area that we're looking to do more dredging. We really think that as you look at our city, and folks, you know, your taxes are high and so forth, the way to combat that is to have increased development, and this really is a great opportunity for that to occur. So that's that. The next slide gets into the zones that were developed, and Mike Donovan, who's in charge of ISD, is going to speak further details about. So we The plan that was passed by the city, voted on by the city council, adopted by the mayor of the city of Lynn, supported by the state delegation, and supported by the residents who participated in all those meetings, encompasses, so this is the bridge coming in, it encompasses that whole area along the waterfront, North Shore Community College, and then down to the MDC Rotary. So that's the area that we're talking about. And if you have an existing business, you're grandfathered, so if you, for instance, if you own Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is in this area, you're grandfathered. But the city's fathers and mothers said, we can do better, and now we have a new vision and new businesses, and not only businesses, we want residential folks living in this area. We want a boardwalk that will connect, similar to what's down in this area. We want a continuous boardwalk from the MDC Rotary all the way to the GE Bridge, Jim Levis Bridge. So that's our vision. Mike is going to talk specifically about the types of uses that we want there. But we want mixed use, we want folks living there, we want folks working there, we want people to utilize. As I started out by saying, born and raised in the city, I can count on one hand how many times I've ever been here. There's really no, and I'm pointing right by the bridge in the grass area, there's really no reason to go there. That's prime property that can be developed for mixed use, and that's what we're hoping for. And at this point, Councilor, I think Michael can talk specifically about the zoning and the uses and the vision that we have.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Mike?
Good evening. Mike Donovan, Director of Special Services, Building Commissioner, also the Zoning Enforcement Officer. I put together some handouts in regards to these districts and zones. We can get more copies. But essentially, it outlines the allowable uses in each of the zones. Just going to briefly start with a description of the different zones and where they are. I mean, Waterfront Zone 1 is this light green. It starts at the Saugus River on the north side of the Linway, extends all the way down to Pleasant Street, bounded by the railroad tracks to the north. So the GE property along down all the way to Pleasant Street is Waterfront 1, as well as on the south side of the Linway, the Saugus River up to Carolyn Road. Waterfront Zone 1 is the largest district, and it allows, as Jim said, it's mixed use. Multifamily, high-rise residential, hotels, marina, places assembly for private recreation, concert hall, assembly areas, yacht clubs, office spaces, restaurants. This is all by right. Prior to this ordinance passing, all the land that I'm describing was a light industrial, a heavy industrial zone, in which the only use allowed by right would be light industrial. You're required to have a special permit. So essentially what the zone ordinance does is by right allows anybody to go in and develop their property as long as they use an allowed use, and then they can build there. In this handout on the first page, I've given you the uses that are allowed as well as the footnotes. I'm not going to go through the footnotes, but there's exemptions to everything. They're in the footnotes. Waterfront District 2 exists way down the Linway in regards to south side of the Linway, from 150 Linway to the Rotary, and then on Surfside Road, the parcel across the street. The difference between 2 and 1 is mostly the height restrictions. 1A is slightly different from 1, but the uses are the same. In the handout here, I've also given you a table that shows you the various height and area restrictions. Essentially, 1, 1A, and 2 are very similar, with specific uses excluded or requiring a special permit in them. 3, the designated port area and the Tidelands overlay are distinctly different. Waterfront District 3 essentially is a zone that was put in there to recognize the fact that the water treatment plant's there, Westland Creamery's there. It's more of an industrial area. A lot of the uses are allowed there, like multifamily, high-rise, residential, public buildings, office space. But the setbacks and the areas required recognize the fact that this is an industrial area. It is the industrial area which, even under the guidance of the master plan, may not change for 50 to 100 years, given the uses that are there. The gas and National Grid's facility. That is the industrial section of the Lynn. Designated port area is this bluish area, and that essentially is the water-related functions. Fishing, yachts, yacht club, and it's very exclusive in its uses and what you can put in there if you are not a water-dependent use. Right now, a good portion of this area is vacant down along there, and it's the port area. The Tidelands Overlay District is the Chapter 91 Tidelands. Essentially, everything in that hash shaded area here is filled tidelands. It's an overlay district. The uses allowed in the overlay district go back to the basic districts over which the overlay district lies. So if it's over, say, a Waterfront 1 district, you're allowed to do everything in the Waterfront 1, subject, of course, though, to Chapter 91, state approval on every project that's in that district. And they have, they'll give you a license for your project, but if it's a non-water dependent use, there is other restrictions that they would require from you, public amendments, I guess I would say. So the 1A, and 2 are meant to be mixed-use office, hotels, restaurants. The only difference being essentially, as I said, is the height and area requirements. As you drive into Lincoln Revere, the plan envisions 20-story towers in Waterfront 1. Waterfront 1A, I believe, drops down to, it's 5 stories. In Waterfront 2, I believe, is 4 stories. And there's a minimum height on these new buildings that you might build there too, as well as the maximum. Now, 1A is 8 stories, 2 is 5 stories, and 3 is 20 stories. I didn't go into the Washington Street overlay and the Sagamore Hill overlay, as it's really not water dependent. Now, in regards to the businesses that are there now, if you have an established business that was there as of the passing of this ordinance, you are grandfathered. That is, you can continue to operate your business in the form that you've been operating your business until you no longer wish to operate your business. You can sell it as it is to somebody else. Essentially, that business is grandfathered in forever unless you abandon the use, walk away from it, or change the use, or you discontinue it. And there is a difference between discontinue and abandon. Discontinue it may mean you stop doing this for a period. If it's a period longer than a year, the city has the right to go after the business and say you walked away from it, you can't reestablish it. If you abandon it, and this happens if somebody changes the use, say you had a car lot down here, and you were running a car sales, and for some reason you decided to lease the property to somebody for an office use, and they use it as an office. Well, the minute they turn it to an office use, your ability to sell cars on that property goes away because it's not an allowed use in the district. So to continue to use your property as you would have been using it, you have to make sure that you don't discontinue or abandon your use or even inadvertently change the use to something that is allowed if you're not allowed. Now, the only exception to that 1 year period is if you have a special permit. If you have a special permit, it's now 2 years that you have to go by with a discontinuance prior to your use no longer being able to be reestablished. So there are a lot of uses in the Lindway which, under this new plan, eventually the city files and determine will go away. However, being things as what they are, if you have a use, say you're selling cars, and you want to expand that use, well, you can't just do it by right. What you would need to do is to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and have a Section 6 finding, not a variance. It's just a finding by the Board of Appeals that your expansion of the non-conforming use is not more detrimental to the neighborhood than what you were doing before. You know, if you were using an acre of property and you wanted to use a little bit more, fine. Now, if you want to establish a business down in this area that's currently not allowed, you would need a variance from the zoning board of appeals, which is a much harder hurdle than a finding, but it is doable. Special permits. Very few activities need a special permit down these areas now. Whereas everything used to need a special permit from the Lynn City Council, very few uses needed, and most of those are public uses like antennas, clinic, telephone exchange, or a transit facility. Everything else is allowed by right, as shown on these pages. So, the zones with the rewritten ordinance actually allow property owners to do more by right than they could prior to the existence of this. If anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thanks, Mike. Questions from the council?
What about change of ownership of a property?
Use has nothing to do with ownership. Both the special permit and the grandfather runs with the property. So if you have property down there, you're selling cars, and I just use that as an example because there's a lot of car lots down there. And you want to sell it to another party, you can do that, and the right, the grandfathering does not go away. The special permit runs with the property, not the individual. Yes, sir.
I came in a few minutes late, but is there any development going on or beginning to go on in the property?
Jim could answer that question better.
I can specifically tell you, sir, the O'Donnell property, which is here, as you come into the city, it's the first open area. We're working very closely with him, and things are moving, and with the development or the potential development of a casino in Suffolk Downs, he's put on hold the focus he was looking at, and now he's waiting to see if the casino does get approved. You know, what we would like to see there, Mike explained, you could build actually 20 stories if you wanted to. In this economy, it's pretty hard to find a developer to spend that kind of money, but he's one of the wealthiest persons in Massachusetts. And he's on hold right now. He's waiting to see what happens with the Suffolk Downs proposal. So that holds great potential.
Yes, sir.
I heard about this walkway, which I'm thinking is similar to the one in front of the Porthole Pub. If we were to put that in, I'm Joe from the Volunteer Yacht Club, and that would interfere with some of the operations with the Lynn Club and the Volunteer Yacht Club putting boats in the water. So the first question is, you know, how are we going to work together with that? And then second, who's going to pay for that boardwalk that's going across the two clubs?
Yeah, well, so if we're talking, I'm not avoiding you, but I'll get back to your original question. But if we're talking about new development, right?
Yeah.
Any new development on the water, you need two permitting, two bodies grant permits, the city and the state. Any oceanfront development, new development, not what you guys do, but new development, it falls under the city zoning, which let's say Joe O'Donnell wants to put a 20-story hotel. He can do that by right, wouldn't have to come before the city council. So the city permits are there. But the Chapter 91, which is a state law, it says you have to provide 100-foot public access. And that's where we would say to Joe, if you want to build a 20-story hotel, we're going to the state saying, before you give that Chapter 91 license, he has to construct a boardwalk. And so under new development, that's how we would tie that in, because it goes with the state law, saying if you're going to build something, the public has to have access to the water. You're a different animal. You're there. We're certainly not going to put you out of business by putting a boardwalk. We would have to sit down with you and figure it out as far as. But you've been there. We want you to stay. You've been a neighbor since I was born, so we want you to stay. We've worked with you. But any new development, the state permitting would require them to put that boardwalk in. And who would pay for it would be the developers, if that was your other question.
Council Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan, we've talked about this before. Probably one of the most lucrative parcels of land has just become available in and that's the GE Gear plant, which has its own outlet to Linway and has a commuter rail stop, which is probably one of the only undeveloped parcels of land in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to have a commuter rail stop at its disposal. Is there any plans for us to extend this waterfront zone into that parcel?
Yes, actually, this is the former gear plant, the building is no longer there. But this is the G parcel here, and that is in Waterfront Zone 1. In 2010, on the last version of all the changes in the designated port area was put in, and the Tidelands Overlay District was done, Sasaki recommended that Waterfront Zone 1 be extended further to the north. Prior to that, in the original plan, it only was the lots abutting, directly abutting the Linway, but there wasn't enough area really to, well, you're gonna put up a 20-story hotel. You're not gonna put it up on 10,000 square feet of property. So it would need to be a larger land mass, so it would accompany the vision that the plan had. So all the property, all the way down, including everything south of the tracks, which would be Alley Street, Harbor Street, Blossom, right down to Pleasant Street, has been zoned to allow some individual or entity in the future to come and put this land together so that they can develop 20-story, up to 20-story property.
And just to give you an idea of the size, the gear plants, and Chairman Capano, you'll appreciate this, just the footprint of the gear plants is 60 acres. It's a huge piece of property. The mayor and myself have a meeting with them, I think it's March 13th, so it's on our radar, Councilor.
Maybe next time, some of the maps, I guess, or maybe.
That was the original study, it's changed.
Is there any thought of development from where Building 19 is and where the hotel used to be? Because if that's developed, it may extend into the rear
Yes.
and induce people to
I agree with you. So where Building 19 is, that's owned by a fellow named Pat McGrath.
Right.
We believe that his lot combined with Joe O'Donnell's lot makes a very nice package. And so we're putting them in the same room to market it. O'Donnell has hired a national marketing firm, but we want it marketed together. And so that's the route we were going, and they kind of hit the pause tape only to see what's going to happen. But I agree with you. If you can combine the mass merchandise lot, the Building 19 lot, with that big open area, now you've got a large area where you can really, and we also have, in addition to the tying it into a potential hotel, we have a foreign investment group looking at it from Korea to put a high-rise there. So there's a lot of interest there. It's definitely the most valuable piece of land that we have. But connecting it with mass merchandise and Building 19 is the key, I agree.
That's possible.
Yes, it is. Yes.
When you talk about putting a high rise there, who's putting the high rise?
It would be a private development.
If the gear plant property is still unavailable, are you guys looking at the option of buying it eminent domain or through some kind of land grant or whatever funding process you could come up with, and then offer incentives to the people on the other side of the Linway, like the metal shops, the scrap yards, to relocate over on that side of the Linway, even though it's Waterfront 1? Because in between the Linway and the rail bed is probably the best place to put those people. And if you're going to offer some incentives to relocate people, that's the place to do it.
So eminent domain, to your point, that's always the last, that's the last option that we would look at. But everything is on the table. We set up this meeting to start out in a friendly discussion. It's a big piece though, and it's a valuable piece. And we've got 22 acres sitting in the middle of our city on Federal Street that GE has left abandoned since 1986, right? We don't want that to happen here. And we met with corporate last October, telling them how angry we are and disappointed that they just let that sit. So I agree that we're meeting with them. You can see how big of an area it is. And, if I had a magic wand, you would take folks, as you were saying, off of the waterfront side and relocate. We don't have control of that property yet, but it's definitely something that we're talking about.
One thing with the gear plant is, I was at the meeting with the plant manager there, and we specifically asked, are you gonna leave that like you left Westland, where you can't use it or anything like that? And she promised that they were gonna make it marketable. That if there was contamination there from the plant, that they were gonna clean it up. And I know they're doing testing there from the state.
Yeah, because they've run heavy metals in there,
That's right.
oils,
Yeah.
cutting, all that stuff for years, so there's guaranteed to be contamination of some kind.
So they did make a commitment to us, you know, that they were gonna clean it up and make it marketable, you know. Whether they live up to that, remains to be seen.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any discussion as to what's going to happen at Seaport Marina?
As far as rehab and so forth?
Redoing, spending some money?
Yeah. Peter, I don't know if you have any, community development oversees Seaport Marina. Don't think there's anybody issues community development, but I know that they just received $800,000. But that's a Band-Aid. It needs millions of dollars put into that. I don't know if the city council can do more than that.
So they're going to do something, but we don't know when.
Well, they got $800,000 for immediate repairs, so that'll be happening within the next couple of months. That's a Band-Aid.
If I can just speak from, I work for Senator McGee as well, I'm running for Idaho City Council, but as Jim said, $800,000 from the state has been allocated to fix it. I mean, it's an immediate, desperate need of repair. Moving forward, we've tried to work with NOAA, who originally gave the loan out to the city, to try to have some loan forgiveness or to work that out. And we're still in arrears of $1.7 million, give or take. So I mean, the number of complicated issues there we are working on. It's just, essentially, I think the first step was getting that money from the state to repair what's there now, so that we're able to use those slips that have been so damaged that we were just losing money by not having them operate at this point. So there are things being done.
Because there's a real concern of ours. We're at the Lynn Yacht Club next door.
Yeah.
And since Seaport is breaking apart, you know, and you've got floats going everywhere, I just don't see what the city's doing about it.
The other, can I just have one thing? The other point, and I know that you're protected better than Seaport is, where you are, and Joe. The other thing is, we had a meeting with the state. The real answer is, it's an unprotected harbor, and the state has to allow us to build a barrier there, because, I mean, the swells start in Quincy, and it just comes up and it kills us.
That's the other,
Yeah,
the other movement that I hear about breakwater.
well, that's what we're trying to get the state to allow
Is
us
that
to
ever
build.
going to take place? Or?
Well, we hope so. We need state approval for that, and the first meeting, they started talking about hail breaks, so I know we're in trouble. Yeah. It's an unprotected area that just gets killed, so the real answer is to create a breakwater.
Any other questions?
My question is that, well, I'll give you a background. I was at a convention 2 months ago in Boston, put on by BizNow, of all the hotel people in the country. Some people much richer than Joe O'Donnell were there, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, everybody in the area. And the reason I went is because I had this dream about putting a little hotel on Blossom Street, right adjacent to the water. And no matter who I went to, whether it was a bank, a finance company, a marine developer, or a hotel, as soon as we said or mentioned Lynn, there was an outburst of laughter. And I said, I don't understand your cynicism. And they explained that the reason for the last 30 years or more there is no hotel in Lynn, that they'd rather put a hotel in the oil fields of Revere or on Route 1 or in Salem, is because nobody wants to come to Lynn, and that's why there is no hotel in Lynn. And I am never going to have a hotel built on my property unless I come up with the money myself. We continued the conversation, and the answer was that you can't go, there's no bank that's lending money to build that kind of real estate in Lynn. That's why nothing is, I submit to you, and other people much smarter than I am, submit to you that nobody is going to put their own money in to build a multi-million dollar piece of property, and there are no lenders for anything. So, that being the bad news and being an obstacle, the next question was, well, how do we overcome this? And one of the suggestions by everybody that I had spoken to said that the city, now that they have a master plan and a waterfront plan and a zoning plan, needs a feasibility study, okay? As far as Lynn goes, perception is reality. You can say this is a good piece, or you can say that you're going to fill 120 keys or 200 keys, but nobody actually believes it. And my question is, what is the city doing about validating the value and the feasibility and the opportunity for the different businesses that they want to try and attract? If you say that you think there's going to be a hotel there, no hotel, even if they had the money, would come unless they felt that they could fill it. So one of the ways to get the ball rolling 5 years later is to say, hey, you do traffic studies, you do impact studies, you do all these other things. What's the probability or possibility of the city of Lynn reaching out and getting a grant or doing a feasibility study for hotels, the attraction of hotels, or the demand for restaurants, or for shopping malls? Right now, everything is just conjecture and projection, and I feel and I think, and isn't this wonderful, and we have the water. But it's all just unsubstantiated opinion. So again, getting back to the advice of all of these professionals, they said that you could go to a bank, you could go to a lender, you could go to a developer if you had a feasibility study for certain types of occupancies or businesses.
Just to piggyback off that, we also own and operate 2 hotels regionally and locally, and reached out to some of our contacts as well, and same thing. We were met with laughter, and they said, show me the demand and we'll show you some interest.
As a matter of fact, we were interested in going forward, and we were soliciting names. My partner has developed many hotels, many multifamily apartments, 20-story buildings, in many communities. We can't find anyone. If there has been a study, you know what, I thought I dropped my notes when you were making the comments, because you echoed exactly my thought. If you have anybody, we'd sincerely like to talk to them so that we can go forward, so that we can kind of, we'd like to fit in all the same plan. So if you have somebody that has expressed an interest to build a multi-story apartment or a hotel, please forward that information to us. I really appreciate it.
I realize it's a state highway, but when you enter the city and you go over that bridge with broken concrete, broken everything, what an introduction that is to the city. It's been that way for years. Every time I hear they close the Linway to fix the bridge, boy, I thought to myself they're going to fix it. They don't fix anything. It's a disgrace.
And so, David, to your point, a couple of things. Hingham, if you look at Hingham 8 years ago, similar to the O'Donnell area, completely vacant area, they built a commuter ferry. The commuter ferry was received by criticism, will never work. They built the ferry, and now if you go down there, there's mixed use, there's stores, there's activity, and it had a dramatic effect, economic development effect in that area. So the area you're talking about is on the same street where the commuter ferry is. Now, the commuter ferry was Tom McGee's project. We received $2 million from the state. We just last week applied for the final phase money, which we should get. It's another $2.3 million. We're probably a year and a half, 2 years away from it being done. I think so. So you asked, what has the city done? So I think the commuter, but let me just finish. So I think the commuter ferry will have a dramatic effect, and I think it would dovetail nicely with your dream, because it's right in that area.
But the commuter ferry is a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about. They're not even thinking about they weren't even thinking about bringing it until whoever was in charge did a feasibility study. They checked how many people would be using it, the viability, and that's why we have it. So all I'm asking is, can the city do something to help the developers in just coming up with some feasibility studies for, if you've got a guy that wants a hotel, great, we'll get a grant or we will do something for you because.
Because I want to help you, and I definitely want to help you. Now, we've given to O'Donnell like the traffic study numbers, which is helpful to finance. What other information that you need, let us know, and we'll be glad. We're here to assist you. We want, 5 years ago, nobody was talking about the waterfront. Now today, we've got a room full of people. I think it's awesome. I'm telling you, David, 5 years ago, you and I wouldn't be talking about this. This entire area now is open up for development because the power line that the city invested $4 million in has been moved. There's now opportunity, there's excitement. People laughing, let them laugh because this is going to happen.
Well, we'd like it all to happen in our lifetime. And in all due respect, you're the professional. I wouldn't know the questions to ask in order to come up with a feasibility study for a hotel.
But I think we already have that information. I'd be glad to share it. The same information we gave to
Just a suggestion that there's probably a lot of people that would like specific information about their specific places. And I know Jim was more than happy to make an appointment. So just because if we did everyone's specific proposal, we'll be here all night. There's another meeting in a few minutes. So I was trying to keep it general. And there's a sign-up sheet going around. If people, is there?
Yeah.
Is there? Okay, good. I'm going to hang around for a while, and if there's, because I know a lot of it, if you've never seen it before, might be confusing. So if you have questions too about your specific businesses, let me know, like where you fit, what zone you're in, how am I grandfathered, where do I fit? There's Waterfront 1, Waterfront 2, questions like that. I'll put a check and I'll get back to you so you'll know specifically what you can do in your area. So, any other questions from the council?
Yeah, just real quick, just a point of correction. Earlier I misspoke when I said 800,000. It's, I believe, 500,000. But we'll make sure the Seaport will have questions.
Peter, one last point on David's comment about financing. We have access to like mass development, which is the state version of EDIC, that we, if somebody is interested in putting a hotel, that we can package a deal with the state, which is mass development for financing. And then we would go to the local banks to say, you have EDIC participating, you have mass development participating, and it puts you in a much stronger position, because banks today are saying no to everybody, right? But with that type of backing from the city and the state, banks look much more favorably. So we would definitely be willing to help folks try to secure financing. And then the last point I wanted to make that Council Capano mentioned, if you have an existing business, it's not like we're telling you to leave, we're not. So if you're there, you want to sell it for the same use, sell it. The city's not going to interfere in any way. All right, this is more about if you want to do something differently, let us try to help you make that happen.
Right. Just with that, I want to thank, this is the first meeting of the new committee here, and I've spoken to everyone here. We want to be an active committee, and we want to help, and we want to provide information when people need it. And I promise next time we'll do this, we'll have a bigger spot. Maybe we'll do it somewhere else. I really apologize for people that had to stand up. I'm really happy that this many people turned out, and but we'll do this again. There's no more questions of the motion?
I do have one quick question. On the area along the water that is the trash area, that went over the state front, the landfill area, who's responsible for cleaning that up? And is there a schedule going forward to have that cleaned up?
It's 30 acres. National Grid pays the taxes on it. They're responsible for it.
National, okay.
Yeah.
And do they have a schedule?
Yeah, 1993.
19?
I want the paperwork I can provide.
Okay.
One more question back here?
No, it's not really a question, so I think it's a comment. I just want to say that I've been in the city, and I think it's probably the first time I can say I feel proud to see something happening like this, because it doesn't matter where you go. all the waterfronts. It doesn't matter where you go, it's developed. City, the Linus dumps, and, I mean, I'm not sure what kind of business it is, but I think it's great. And I think the people who saying that their friends are laughing, I think we are the ones who are responsible for why they're laughing. We have to show them the fact that we want to develop the city. Let's be part of it, regardless of what business we're in. Because 20 years from now, it has to be different. Nothing stays the same.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter where you go. Change is okay.
One more question.
Yeah, with that auction going in, are they gonna take over that car dump that's back there that all the cars are dumped in there?
And I'm only advocating change, that's all I'm doing.
Is that all happening?
The motion to adjourn? Thanks for coming.